Hi guys, so Boris Johnson was in Brussels on Wednesday meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission. That didn't go very well. He returned to speak to Cabinet on Thursday, and then also on Thursday in the afternoon he delivered this speech to the British people, basically laying the groundwork for a no deal Brexit. So let's hear what he had to say.
I've just updated Cabinet on where we've got to with our friends and partners in the EU, and they agreed very strongly with me that the deal on the table is really not at the moment right for the UK. And
okay, so the deal on the table is not right for the UK. Now maybe I'm over-analysing what Boris Johnson is saying. Maybe I should apply more Occam's razor and just take it as it is. But I think Boris Johnson likes to play somewhat the, maybe not like to do it, but I think it's part of his psyche, this Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And what I mean by this is, it's a type of condition that people have where they create a disaster and then run to rescue people. Now, what I mean about this in regards to Brexit is, it's possible that Boris Johnson is playing up the possibility of no deal happening, of not being able to salvage anything, sabotaging himself in a way, and then at the last minute riding in to save the day and claiming victory. Now this was something I thought of in the past, where I thought Boris Johnson would run down the clock and then at the very last minute ride in and say, look, we'll accept this, this and this, and then sell it to the British people as a great deal. But I think maybe he's going in a different direction.
I'll tell you why. There's a couple of things at least. The most important is that really just in the last couple of weeks, they've brought back the idea of this equivalence between the...
No, they haven't brought back anything. Now he's lying. Anything that the EU have presented hasn't changed. The EU's negotiating position hasn't changed since the beginning. Now Boris Johnson maybe is just understanding it now, and then he's having a problem with it. But the EU have never introduced something out of the blue. They're quite transparent. They said at the beginning of the negotiations, this is our negotiating position. This is what we want to achieve. At the time, they actually asked the UK, can you present us your negotiating position? And they wouldn't. Not for many months.
The UK and the EU, which basically means that whatever new laws they brought in, we would have to follow, or else face punishment, sanctions, tariffs, or whatever. And it was put to me that this was kind of a bit like twins, and the UK is one twin, the EU is another, and if the EU decides to have a haircut, then the UK has got to have a haircut, or else face punishment. Or the EU decides to buy an expensive handbag, if the EU decides to buy an expensive handbag, then the UK has to buy...
Okay, this is a ridiculous analogy. and I know something about ridiculous analogies. This is a ridiculous analogy because, first of all, you're not twins. You're two different entities. And what he's talking about here is that, so what could happen in the future is if the UK and the EU are aligned, the EU later on say, look, we want to introduce new legislation because we're evolving, okay? The EU regard this as the evolution clause, the UK regard it as the ratchet clause. But basically what it means is if the EU change something later on, increase, for example, the EU say, tomorrow we want to eliminate single-use plastic, okay, for environmental reasons. And the UK say, no, we want to maintain single-use plastic. Well, the EU will say, well, if you want to trade with us and you want to sell your single-use plastic in the EU, well, we're not going to accept that. Now, I'm just using single-use plastic as an example. There are hundreds of thousands of different possibilities here. But for example, let's go with the single-use plastic. The EU say, look, we've introduced new legislation to eliminate this from production, from sale. The UK is trading with us. Well, we don't want this single-use plastic in our supermarkets or in our shops. So the UK must change. Now, what Boris Johnson, the problem with, that may sound on the surface, well, you know, that's not very fair. The EU are changing the rules and the UK have to follow suit. Yes, but Boris Johnson isn't telling you the more important aspect of this. You're getting something in return. You're getting access to the single market. It's not that the EU are saying you have to follow these rules and that's it. The EU has said if you want a trade deal, you have to follow these rules. You have to align with us going forward. Now, this isn't something set in stone, okay? Negotiations can be reopened later on. Once a trade deal is not something that is set forever. It can be renegotiated in the future. Boris Johnson could basically say, okay, we'll sign up to this, but we want to be able to renegotiate this in 5 years' time, for example. But that's not what he's saying. The problem with Boris Johnson is he will not tell you all of the truth. He will say, look, it's like twins. You know, if the EU say we want a new handbag or we want a haircut, we have to follow suit. That's not fully the truth. As I said before, the EU introduced new legislation. If the UK want to maintain trade with the EU, then they need to follow suit. It's about access to the single market. Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers seem to think that the EU and the UK are equals. They're not. And I think it's a bit disingenuous the way that Boris Johnson describes it as twins, because when we think of twins, we think of equals. It's not the same. The EU is much bigger, is a huge market. The UK is a much smaller market. But once again, this type of analogy works with Brexiteers.
Buy an expensive handbag too, or else face tariffs and punishment. And clearly that's not a sensible way to proceed. It's unlike any other free trade deal. It's a way of keeping the UK kind of locked in the EU's orbit, in the
It's not about keeping them in an orbit. It says if you want to have access to the single market, you need to do certain things. If you don't want to do those certain things, then go away. You're not getting access to the single market. The UK want a free trade deal. If they want a free trade deal, there are conditions that come with that. One of the conditions is that you are aligned with us when we change rules. You change your rules with us. That's the condition. Now, you don't like that condition. It's the same way as, you know, if in the past, when I wanted an internet connection, they included a telephone. I said, look, I don't need a telephone. But they said, that's the condition. If you don't like the condition, you can go to a different provider. We don't always like the conditions of the contract. But the alternative is what? To go away. But if you go away, who are you going to trade with?
Regulatory orbit. And the second thing, obviously, is fisheries, where many years now after people have voted to leave the EU, we
voted to leave the EU. What has leaving the EU got to do with fisheries? Fisheries is about the trade deal. Fisheries is not. There's nothing nothing I can find in the withdrawal agreement about fisheries. There's nothing. You didn't say anything when you were asking people to vote for Brexit. You didn't mention anything about fisheries. So why are you bringing up about people voting to leave and then this has something to do with fisheries? This is part of the trade deal.
Wouldn't still have control of our waters, and that's no good.
Control of our waters. Once again, it's about fisheries. It's not about control of the waters. Control of your waters. You have control of your waters. We're talking about fisheries. Fisheries and control of waters are two separate things. Once again, Boris and the Brexiteers are mixing things up and hoping to confuse people.
And so the Cabinet agreed very strongly that we're really not there yet at all. And what I've said to our negotiators is that we've got to keep going and we'll go the extra mile. and we will, and I will go to Brussels, I'll go to Paris, I'll go to Berlin or wherever to try to get this home and get to a deal. But there's always the possibility, the prospect of coming out on Australian terms, which I...
Australian terms. They keep pushing this. Now, this is my fear. If it was mentioned once, I would have pretty much dismissed it and said, look, this is just posturing. But I'm truly afraid now, because Boris Johnson continually talks about Australian terms. Dominic Raab has been talking about Australian terms. Other Brexiteers have been talking about Australian terms. This is about pulling the wool over people's eyes. It's about confusing the public. The public don't know that an Australian deal means no deal. An Australian deal is as valuable as an Afghan deal or a North Korean deal. It doesn't exist. You know, us Remainers used to joke about, you know, unicorns, because unicorns don't exist. And Boris Johnson is now trying to sell unicorns again. Why didn't he just call it the unicorn deal? We're going to come out on unicorn terms, because it's just as valuable.
I believe are very good terms, and we, as I say, can prosper mightily in that future, which is just around the corner.
Look, you know, he knows he's talking crap. That's the worst thing about all of this. You know, it's not like he didn't know. Well, if he didn't know, maybe that would actually be worse. The Prime Minister didn't know that Australian terms means nothing. Yeah, no, I don't know which is worse, him lying or not knowing. But he's lying here. He knows that Australian terms mean a no deal Brexit. He's treating the public with contempt.
And there are all sorts of amazing opportunities for this country. And so what I told the Cabinet this evening is to get on and make those preparations. We're not stopping the talks. We'll continue to negotiate. But looking at where we are, I do think it's vital that everybody now gets ready for that Australian option.
Everyone gets ready for that Australian option. What option, Boris? What option? Why don't you just be honest with people and say, look, we couldn't get it. We're too useless. We're too lazy. We wanted to copy and paste a Canada-style deal because, you know, it's just too much time and effort to actually negotiate one. So we just asked, you know, Michel Barnier, can we just copy and paste the Canadian one? And he said, no, you can't. I'm like, oh, what about a Japanese style deal? Can we copy and paste the Japanese one? And they said, no, you can't do that either. Oh, and then do we really have to negotiate one? Yes, you do. If you want a trade deal, you need to negotiate. You need to spend time and effort on it. And Boris Johnson just probably couldn't be bothered. And now he's just going to say, to hell with it. Let's just go out without any deal. Look, I'll be probably gone from number 10 in a few months' time. Once this Brexit thing starts to reveal itself, the Conservative Party will start taking a hit in the polls. Maybe there will be a few by-elections and the Tories will be in serious trouble. And I'll just be booted out. And, you know, it'll be someone else's problem. Maybe it'll be Michael Gove's problem. Maybe it'll be Rishi Sunak's problem. Maybe it'll be Matt Hancock's problem. Boris just doesn't give a crap at this stage. Probably went over to Brussels not to actually negotiate, but just to, I don't know, try the wine or the beer or the fish. It's a sad state of affairs. And unfortunately, I think Boris Johnson is going to get away with it. The public will start cheering on an Australian-style deal. There will be people waving Australian flags in Parliament, I can guarantee it. Maybe not guarantee it, but there'll be people waving Australian-style flags, not even Australian flags. There'll be Australian-style flags. Because people will be convinced once again that Boris Johnson was getting his deal done, was getting Brexit done. It was an oven-ready deal, an oven-ready Brexit. It's quite sad. And my heart goes out to the British people. Because as I've said before, Boris Johnson will be okay. The other idiot you can see on your screen will be okay. Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Michael Gove. All of these people will be just okay. They'll be fine. They won't have any worries. It's the ordinary people that will suffer. The people who will be forced onto universal credit because the companies that they worked for have to outsource their work overseas or close their facilities in the UK because they can't afford to operate with these new tariffs or because of these delays and bureaucracy. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. I want to say a big thank you to all of my patrons. You ensure that this channel continues to exist. I'm eternally grateful for all of your support. If you join Patreon, you will receive instant access to our Discord server where we have both audio and video chats. You can chat with me and other patrons where we discuss important and non-important issues. Becoming a patron per month costs about the same as a large coffee, so why not check it out?